Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Macro Waves, the BNP Paribas Economic Research Podcast. Today we are looking at household consumption, which remains the main driver of growth in both the Eurozone and the United States. As we all know, household consumption suffered a major negative shock during the COVID-19 pandemic. Since then, growth has remained very moderate in the Eurozone, while it has accelerated sharply in the United States. After the pandemic, the inflationary crisis and contrasting economic policies of recent years, where do we stand on either side of the Atlantic? I'm Lucie Barrette, economist specializing in the Eurozone, and today I'm joined by two of my colleagues from the Advanced Economist team, with whom I had the pleasure of publishing an eco-insight on this subject a few weeks ago. Anis Ben Saidani, United States specialist, and Stéphane Colliac, France specialist. Good afternoon to you both, and thank you for being with us today.
Hello.
Hello, and thank you, Lucie, for that introduction. Let's start with the main contrast. From 2021 onwards, the negative impact of COVID on household consumption has been swiftly offset in the United States. In the Eurozone, however, the situation has been different and consumption has remained sluggish. What is behind this initial divergence?
In the Eurozone, the moderation in household consumption growth in the post-COVID period has mainly been due to the poor performance of the variables underlying it. These variables are known as fundamentals and include households' real gross disposable income, their real housing and financial wealth, and the real 10-year interest rate. More specifically, we have found that the growth of real financial wealth has slowed markedly compared with the pre-COVID period and has that of housing wealth. Therefore, overall, the savings rate has remained well above its pre-COVID level in the main Eurozone countries. This is due to a more favorable trend in the purchasing power of disposable income, or GDI, than in wages alone. This dynamic has had redistributive effects that have increased the savings rate.
I can imagine that not all Eurozone countries have experienced the same trend in terms of consumptions and savings. Stéphane, can you tell us whether you have observed a high degree of cross-country heterogeneity?
Yes, the savings rate has risen everywhere, but not to the same extent or for the same reasons. The biggest increase was in France, which has been driven in particular by the savings behavior of older people. Their incomes have been better protected from inflation, particularly pensions and property income, while on the other hand, wages have not kept pace with inflation, which has weighed on household consumption. Wages have also lagged behind inflation in other countries, and this has been particularly detrimental in Germany, where inflation has been almost 5 points higher in cumulative terms than in France or Italy, which has affected the consumption of less well-off employers.
I would now like to turn to you, Anis. Can you explain what has happened in the United States?
Sure. In the United States, contrary to what we observed in the Eurozone, consumption growth has been maintained. Our model, based on the same fundamentals as those given earlier for the Eurozone, explains this trend fairly well. Nevertheless, we note that these variables alone have not been sufficient to explain the dynamism of US consumption, so we think that changes in behavior have occurred since the pandemic.
That's very interesting because it shows that compared with the fundamentals, European households' consumption has underperformed, while US household consumption has outperformed. Anis, what has happened in the post-COVID period that could explain this outperformance in US consumption?
Two factors underpin this. The first, chronologically, is the massive scale and the nature of the fiscal policy response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which included direct financial support for households. The various support and stimulus packages led to the buildup of excess savings, which sustained consumption for a long time as households did not deplete them until early 2024. The second is a change in behavior. According to the IMF, the marginal propensity of Americans to consume housing wealth went threefold in the post-COVID period, and the adjustment of our model by this factor proves conclusive. This result helps to explain why it is the wealthiest households that are driving the recent growth in consumer spending.
Let's now turn to the outlook for the coming quarters. Is the era of US outperformance coming to an end?
In our view, US outperformance is likely to lose momentum, but without tipping over into underperformance. This moderation is expected for several reasons. Firstly, at an aggregate level, the decline in population growth will have an impact on consumer spending. Secondly, the balance between inflation and employment has turned less favorable to households. Inflation is on the rise again and is unlikely to return to target before at least 2028. At the same time, the labor market has cooled markedly with a decline in payroll growth and in the ratio of job vacancies to unemployed people, which contrasts with the post-pandemic situation that supported wage catch-up. Finally, the administration's fiscal policy is based on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which adds no stimulus, and on tariffs, which have an upward effect on inflation. Moreover, the OBBBA extends a tax system that favors the highest incomes, while tariffs are brought disproportionately by the lowest incomes. Under these conditions, fiscal policy is not redistributive and appears unfavorable to consumption.
I'll turn the question back to you, Lucy. In the Eurozone, can we finally expect this rebound in consumption?
We are indeed expecting a rebound in consumption, but it still varies from country to country. Germany and Italy could see their savings rate wipe out the post-COVID increases by 2027, supported by improved growth prospects, and in Italy by income tax cuts for the middle classes. Spain will maintain a high savings rate thanks to sustained growth in gross domestic product, allowing dynamic consumption without dissaving.
What about France, Stéphane?
Household consumption growth slowed further in 2025, probably to 0.4%. According to our estimates. The inflationary period, which ended 2 years ago, has been replaced by a heightened fear of rising unemployment, as reflected in the INSEE Household Confidence Survey. However, unemployment rose only moderately to 7.7% in Q3 2025 from 7.4% a year earlier. This relative resilience in the labor market helped to begin to dissipate fears of unemployment in the second half of the year. This should lead to an improvement in household consumption growth, which should return to a growth rate of 1% per annum from 2026 onwards, more in line with the income dynamics that have been at play since the second half of 2024, with wages once again rising faster than inflation. In conclusion, then, we are witnessing normalization. The Eurozone is gradually correcting its underperformance, and the US is moderating its outperformance. The key points are as follows. In the Eurozone, consumer spending should rebound, but unevenly, with countries such as Spain better positioned than France or Germany. In the US, the outperformance is running out of steam, with risks linked to inflation and the labor market. So here is a final question for you both. What are the main risks that could append these scenarios?
In the United States, consumption is more reliant on the wealth effect than in Europe. As a result, its growth is vulnerable to a sharp correction in stock market valuations, which, driven upwards by the Magnificent Seven, are historically high.
In the Eurozone, these uncertainties appear to be more balanced. However, the latest economic indicators confirm a marked improvement. Although still high, European households' fears about the labor market have recently eased and could continue to do so, with the labor market proving resilient. On the other hand, the moderate rebound in real wages after a fall during the inflationary period and their continuing relatively high level of uncertainty could have a downward effect on the prospects for a recovery in household consumption in Europe.
Thank you both for these insights. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. You can find the full report in our latest Eco Insight entitled Household Consumption Heading for a Rebound in the Eurozone and a Slowdown in the US. Visit the BNP Paribas Economic Research website. All of the links are in the description. See you soon for a new episode of Macro Waves.